everyone ready? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay, cool. So we're going to go over some men's mental health awareness information. Just a bit of an introduction about myself. As Manal mentioned, I have a postgrad degree in psychology. I'm very passionate about mental health and well-being. I also volunteer for Lifeline Digital as well. And I ran this session back in September for Are You OK Day or something similar. And I've ran sessions as well for work. Some content, if you came to the last one, might be the same, but most of it is quite different. Cool. So we're going to go over an overview of mental health, mental illness, and facts and figures. These are general, not gender specific. Then we're going to do gender influence, so reporting biases and gender influences on mental health. Then we're going to look at the cultural differences, so potential causes of mental health problems and barriers to accessing support that are influenced by culture, and then some resources, so what's available currently for you to access. Cool. So before we start, just want to remind everyone it is okay not to be okay. Some of the information that we're going to talk about can be quite overwhelming. And if you've experienced, any kind of mental health issues or someone you love has, some things can be quite triggering. So if you need to take a moment to leave, that's fine. I won't get upset. Just please do it quietly. Otherwise I'll get distracted.
If you're... my Wi-Fi.
No?
I'll hide my Wi-Fi.
Yeah, okay. Sounds like a plan. We are going to mention suicide as well. So that can also be quite triggering for some people. If you're thinking that it's not going to be engaging or maybe not interesting or not relevant, I do encourage you to stay. For over 40% of people in their lifetime do experience a mental illness, and that is a very conservative number. So it is likely that is way more than 40%, more likely to be 50%. So what is the difference between mental health and mental illness? If you were here last time, maybe don't answer. You don't want to go?
I will be here last time.
Actually asking us, is
Yes.
mental illness something that you're born with?
It can be genetic, not necessarily though something that you're born with. There are genetic factors. Yeah.
Could it be like a mental health, like a bad time you're going through, and mental illness is like being autistic or having ADHD?
Having a disorder, yeah.
Maybe someone that's already sick and that sickness is going to lead to mental illness.
Yeah.
Like about whatever wrong.
Yeah. They're all kind of on the right track. So mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well, work well, and contribute to their community. It is an integral component of health and well-being that underpins our individual and collective abilities to make decisions, build relationships, and shape the world we live in. It is a basic human right and is crucial to personal, community, and socioeconomic development. So the best way to think of mental health is the way you would your physical health, right? So mental illness is a mental illness or mental disorder. So they mean the same thing. They're used interchangeably. I'll probably use both throughout. It is a health problem that significantly affects how a person feels, thinks, behaves, and interacts with other people. It is diagnosed according to a standardized criteria. So that's what you were saying in terms of the autism spectrum disorder, your depressive disorder, anxiety, etc. They're all your kind of mental illnesses. The standardized criteria is usually it's based on the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, so the DSM, the 5th edition. There are others that can also, be used to diagnose. It is associated with changes in the brain structure, chemistry, and function, and it does have a biological basis. So when we're talking about mental illness, there is a biological element, and hormones such as your dopamine and your serotonin, they play a factor as well. We'll go over some of the common disorders in the next few slides. I do want to define well-being as well. So well-being is a positive state experienced by individuals and societies. Similar to health, it is a resource for daily life and is determined by social, economic, and environmental conditions. It encompasses quality of life and the ability of people and societies to contribute to the world with a sense of meaning and purpose. So I guess the biggest difference is well-being is a more holistic approach. It includes everything, including your physical, your social, and your physical, your social, and your psychological, as well as your emotional health. So it's everything together. You'll see well-being mentioned a lot in schools and in workplaces because they want to promote health overall. So we're going to go over the statistics now. No? Okay. 1 in 5 Australians aged 16 to 85 have experienced a mental disorder in the last 12 months. So this data is actually from May of this year. 43% of Australians will experience a mental disorder in their lifetime. And these are new statistics about deaths that were just released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. 3,307 Australians have died by suicide in 2024. That is 9 people. Oh, is that enough? Yeah? That is 9 people a day, which is a lot of people. And the reason why this kind of sessions is so important, 75% of suicides are males. So a large portion of the people that are, committing suicide, they are males. I want to make a point about the data as well. This does not include homeless people. They're not included in the data set. And if homeless people aren't included, it's safe to assume as well that Indigenous, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander people that are out in country are also not included. And we know that they have higher rates of mental illness as well. It doesn't include people in correction centres, people in youth justice, people in mental health facilities, and people in hospitals as well. So it doesn't include a decent amount of people. It is also dependent on what people report and whether or not people get diagnosed. If you don't get diagnosed, you're obviously not going to be considered in the statistics. So this is very, very conservative. It's probably closer to 50% disorder in their lifetime. And the numbers for mental disorders in the last 12 months are probably higher as well. So some global kind of statistics, 720,000 people in the last 12 months, I believe, have died by suicide globally. It is the third leading cause for people 15 to 29 years old, so our youth and our young adults. Prevalence of depression or anxiety was higher in young Australian men and women between the ages of 15 to 34 at 22%, than people aged 55 and over at 55%. And since 2017, depression or anxiety have exceeded asthma as the most common serious illness for 15 to 30-year-old Australians. Again, this really is impacting our young people, our youth, our young adults. And we all know someone with asthma, so it's very likely we all know someone who has depression or anxiety as well. Most common mental disorders. So anxiety is the most common at 17%. These are Australian statistics, again, in the last 12 months, and they were published in May of this year. Anxiety is an emotion characterized by worry and physical symptoms of tension in which an individual anticipates impending danger, catastrophe, or misfortune. With anxiety, females do rate higher than males. It is your fight or flight response for something that doesn't really need that kind of response. And it includes different disorders such as generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety, or phobias. Your mood disorders, they're conditions that disturb our mood to the point where it becomes difficult to function in relationships or at work. This includes depression, which are really low moods, and bipolar, which are high and low. Females are also higher with mood disorders as well. And the third one is substance use. That is the use of illegal drugs or alcohol in excess and the use of pharmaceutical medication in ways other than intended. That sits at 3%. However, males are significantly higher in that category. They sit at 75%. So substance use, again, much higher in males. It sits at 75%. One of the things I want to point out that I will also touch on later is that women are reported to have a mental illness by a doctor or nurse more than men. 16% for women and 8% for men. So it's more than double. And that does have to do with how men and women present with their symptoms, which we'll touch on a little later. I've included ADHD because this is quite common for the youth as well, from 4 to 17. 7% of kids that age. It includes a combination of persistent problems such as difficulty paying attention, hyperactivity, and impulsive disorder. We also have anxiety disorder for kids in that range at 7% and major depressive order at 3%. Okay, cool. Were there any that kind of shocked you in that one? Yeah, no.
I'm 18, but I still get the ADHD symptoms.
Yeah, you are now an adult with ADHD, but you were diagnosed as a kid, right? Yeah.
how you said more women are more likely to get diagnosed, more women than men.
Yeah.
Higher number. I think it's because men don't actually want to go get diagnosed.
Exactly.
And that's why the suicide rate for men is a lot higher.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an issue.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's what, there is a lot of research around that as well. How can we have 75% of suicides be male, and they're, showing lower under depression and anxiety? All right, so the mental health continuum. So essentially, the idea is that you will float through from healthy to reacting or coping, then to injured, if something severe kind of happens, and then to ill or overwhelmed, where you kind of have a disorder throughout your life, right? Hopefully you don't end up in the ill or overwhelmed space, but if you do, it's okay. There is support and resources available for you. So an example of common and reversible distress is like you have a bad day at work, your car breaks down, you need to change a tire, right? Very annoying, very frustrating, but you'll get through it. Something that would be considered severe and persistent is potentially someone passes away, and that impacts you a lot emotionally, and maybe you can't work for 3 weeks, or you don't want to leave the house. So that's something that's, a bit more severe. How you react or what supports you have available will indicate whether you end up with a disorder or whether you revert back. So the idea is that you will fluctuate between this, throughout your life. And if you have the right supports available, or if you notice kind of your symptoms, you can remain in that healthy space, but it is completely normal. It is completely, understandable. And there's nothing wrong with not being okay. Cool. So we're going to touch on gender influences. So this is really important because there is a silent crisis in men's mental health. Like Motivet said, it doesn't make sense that there are, so many suicides that are male, but we're not seeing it in the disorders. Men make up 75% of suicides and substance use disorder, but they are lower in depression. And this, again, doesn't make sense because depression is heavily correlated with suicide. 50% of completed suicide is on the basis of depression. Men have higher rates in ADHD and the autism spectrum disorder. However, this is also could be due to how they present with symptoms. Younger boys present with different symptoms to younger girls. And so a lot of girls can sometimes go undiagnosed with autism or with ADHD until they're adults. There are higher rates of conduct disorder as well as disruptive and impulsive control disorders. And there is a lot of comorbidity, which is when you have more than one disorder. So substance use tends to go hand in hand with depression and or anxiety as well. And another thing to note is depression and anxiety, when you do the scale, for example, at a doctor, it is a self-measured scale. You get a form, it asks in the last 2 weeks, how sad have you felt? In the last 2 weeks, when have you felt helpless? It's very much dependent on how you answer. So if men are already prone to not being honest about their emotions or how they're feeling, they're very likely to not represent their actual situation correctly or to its full extent when they're going to seek help.
We used to cheat.
It's not cheating. It's not being as honest. So one of the symptom differences between men and women is women act in. So they act in the way you expect them to. They get sad, they cry, they complain, they might go talk to a friend, they might withdraw from things. When you see, we tend to exhibit very standard, very understood symptoms of depression, of anxiety. When men get upset, they act out. They have higher levels of alcohol use and drug misuse, dangerous risk-taking behavior, poor impulse control, increased anger and irritability. So when they're, upset, they could be very sad, but instead of, you know, going home and crying, they're yelling at everyone and making it everyone else's problem. And this is consistent with common displays of masculinity, and does not match with what people usually describe as depression. And this is kind of what makes diagnosis very, very hard. So even if it is spotted by someone, it's really hard sometimes to differentiate or to understand that there is a deeper problem at hand. Risk factors and health services. So this is general for men. I will go into the cultural element as well, and they do overlap a lot. So common risk factors for men, employment and occupational issues, so losing your job, for example. Men derive their self-identity, self-esteem, and self-worth from their jobs. So losing your job takes a really big hit on your mental health. Family issues and divorce. This impacts both genders. However, men find significant purpose and meaning in life in their roles as fathers and husbands. And after a family breakdown, males tend to be quite reliant on their immediate family, so their wife and their kids, whereas women have greater support networks. They're more likely to have friends, they're more likely to have family that they can rely on. So it's a little bit, you know, they have a bit more support for when they go through something like a divorce. Adverse childhood experiences. So this again impacts both genders. However, boys who have been abused or girls who have been abused represent very differently. Girls follow the standard, you know, symptoms, very easy to spot. Boys, again, they act out. They risk-taking behavior, disruption, they drop out, and substance use. So sometimes it gets classified as a social issue. So they're playing too many video games, or there's too much violence in movies, when in reality it could be something much deeper. Other life transitions. There is evidence to suggest that men struggle with life transitions. So that's divorce, that's, divorce, death, unemployment, and even becoming a father can be quite difficult for some men. Underutilization of health services. So men are less likely, with 11% to see a psychiatrist than women, and 18% less likely to see other mental health professionals. As Yahya touched on, there is an element of it's being seen as weak. It's seen as unmanly to seek support. This is derived, you know, our concept of masculinity and femininity is derived from our parents. It's derived from education, our popular culture, you know, what we see in movies, what we see in TV shows, what we see in songs, media, and it impacts how we view vulnerability, emotional distress, and mental illness. There is also some research to suggest that the mental health system is more feminine in its present or most understood form. However, it is really all about you finding the right support. All right, cultural influences. Before I continue, was there any questions want to add? No, cool. All right, awesome. So Australia is very diverse, with 25% of people being born overseas and almost half having at least one parent born overseas. Arabic is also the third most spoken language in Australia, which I found out today. And when it comes to cultural influences, as Yahya touched on, mental health is still stigmatized. You're still seen as a majnoon, you're crazy, like, why are you going to go see a doctor? Don't be sad. It's still a very, very stigmatized topic, which can make seeking support very difficult. And the way we refer to our mental health systems is also, you know, we downplay it. So we just say, Ana taban, I'm tired. You know, nafsiti taban. This doesn't really encompass the full mental health spectrum or what you actually might be feeling. You've downplayed your emotions because that's what you're used to culturally. Applying a cultural perspective is really important when we do talk about topics like mental health. Culture profoundly shapes perceptions of mental health and healthcare. Arabs are also considered a collectivist culture compared to Australians, who are considered to be individualistic. Collectivist means you put the group before the individual, and individualistic means you put yourself first before others. So as Arabs, we tend to put everyone, you know, everyone has to eat, everyone gets a plate at the table, whereas Australians, it's not within their culture. It's very much I need to get this, or it's for me. Cultural norms also heavily impact help-seeking behavior and the presentation of symptoms. When we had the previous speeches, both Ali, Adam, Billy, Yahya, they all touched on the impact culture has had on their mental health journeys. All right, so the next couple of slides, I'm going to look at a study. A lot of the information I derived is from a study that was published actually this year in 2025. It was on Australian Arab mental health, and they interviewed 45 immigrants, first-gen immigrants. That means that they were born overseas and now they've immigrated here. They were born in one of the 22 Arab League countries, majority of them being Syrian and Iraq. Given the humanitarian crisis in both countries, Australia has obviously brought in a lot of Syrians and Iraqis. And as a result of that, there are higher cases of PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, depression and anxiety amongst our refugee populations. So in the study, they looked at their beliefs about what causes mental health problems. So the first one was navigating identities. It might relate more to anyone who was born overseas, but I feel it myself, even as someone who was born here. And it's the feeling that you're not really Australian, but you're also not Syrian or Lebanese or whatever background you are, right? It's this weird in-between place. And it can be quite hard to balance the different cultures and expectations, which really impacts a sense of self and can cause emotional fatigue. So a lot of the migrants, you know, they found it very difficult to assimilate because what they're used to is not here. We're a very, very different country in Australia compared to what is the case overseas. There is also the stress of preserving and passing down culture, especially as just generations continue to be born away from the motherland. Fathers want their kids to succeed, but a fear of success, but they fear success in the Western world will pull them further away from their cultures and their traditions. And a big trigger for a lot of them were, you know, their kids or their grandkids not being able to speak Arabic, right? You lose your connection with your language, you're more likely to lose your connection with your culture. It is also seen as a duty as a father, as the head of a household, to preserve your culture and tradition in your children. And you know, if you struggle to do so, it can really impact your mental health and your sense of identity. Masculinity. Culturally, men are the protectors and the providers. Back home, men are the leaders of the household. They make all the income, they protect the family, and they are largely the decision makers. When they come here to Australia, women have different rights. Women do tend to work, and they tend to have an equal right in responsibilities and an equal power in decision making as well. So specifically for the immigrants in this case, for them, they struggled a lot with this differentiation between back home where they've got more power, more control, and more importance, and then coming here to a country where they're seen as more equals with their wives or with the women in society. Perfect timing. It can make men feel displaced and frustrated, helpless, and it can also impact their sense of purpose. It can also trigger feelings of self-doubt, failure, and emotional isolation if they are unable to provide. It's also important to bear in mind, I just want to add here with this one, it's very important, I think, as men, I'm addressing you guys, to bear in mind, obviously, current economic circumstances. There are very limited households that don't need two incomes. It's not feasible. It's not a reflection of you as a man or your ability to provide. It's just the reality of the situation. So I don't think that should be a reflection of how masculine you are. Loneliness and social isolation. Again, this was a big one because they were migrants, so they were coming from overseas, and they found it quite hard to assimilate and quite hard to adapt to the new culture. But even in, people that are born here, we're very, again, communal as Arabs. We like to come together. We like to do things together. And Australia is very individual. Nobody cares about you. Your neighbor doesn't care about you, unless they're Arab or they're from another culture. But it is very different to the way it is back home. In our home countries, we're quite social. And for the men that come here, they're leaving familiar societal structures and community ties. So it can be quite difficult. And then, of course, cultural differences in trying to connect. Every Aussie likes to go have a beer at the pub. And as Muslims, it's not something that we do. So connecting with people here can be quite difficult because you're forced into cultural norms that you might not agree with or might not sit right with you. Work and self-worth, as mentioned earlier. Work is a really big factor in men's mental health. A lot of identity, a lot of purpose is derived from your job. For the migrants specifically in this case, they found it very difficult because when they came here, their qualifications were no longer valid. And so you went from being a pharmacist to a butcher. Very different jobs, each with their own merit, but when you've studied or you've done what you need to do and then you come here and you can't work that job, it can be quite difficult. But the same can be said for someone here who's a tradie, they injure their arm, they can no longer work their trade. Their sense of purpose and what they love potentially doing or what they're used to doing or what they're good at is now taken away from them. There is also the impact of women working. So there is the element of being a provider is so important. And when women work, they are no longer the provider or their sole provider at least. Help-seeking behaviors and attitudes. So informal support, Noah actually mentioned this to me a couple of weeks ago. He said that I would prefer to go talk to my boys or my cousin or people that I know rather than a stranger. And that is something that is shared among other Arab men. The preference is for informal support. Your friends, your family, people that you know already. However, the research does say that the conversations there's no deeper emotions. It's more external stuff. How was work? Oh, work's been really hard. I'm really struggling, potentially buying something. But they don't go into depth, which is where you really need to have these kind of conversations if you want to look after your mental health. There is a tension between needing emotional release, but wanting to still remain wanting to adhere to societal and cultural pressures of what masculinity is. So there's a bit of discomfort between wanting to talk about your problems, but still wanting to be a man and still wanting to maintain that kind of image. Another element is men tend to not want to burden their family. This is factored because of they're seen as protectors and they feel they have a sense of duty. Even though this can be quite damaging, it can cause a lot of emotional isolation and disconnection, and it can lead to increased stress, anxiety, and depression. And as we saw in the continuum, if you don't get support, you will progress through that continuum and you could potentially end up with a diagnosis of some sort. They're also actively likely to seek religious leaders for support, as they feel that they can share in a culturally acceptable space without risking their image. Again, it comes down to trust. As Yahya said, he doesn't want you to come to him anyway. Someone actually did raise in the study that they fear the potential issue of misuse of authority as well when going to religious figures, and it wasn't just Muslim men in the study, it was also Christians as well. Formal support. So there is a reluctance to seek formal support, which could be due to limited mental health literacy, privacy concerns, and cultural concerns. So the core reluctance to seeking formal support stems from the traditional masculine concept, which emphasizes emotional restraint and independence to avoid shame, but also to uphold your family honor. It can also be seen as a challenge. If I need to go see a psychologist or I need to go talk to someone, how can I be seen as a provider for my family or as a protector for my family? It just doesn't sit comfortably for a lot of men. Sometimes speaking about family problems can be seen as exposing private struggles or compromising the family's reputation. But with formal support, specifically in Australia, confidentiality is very, very severe. If a psychologist or a doctor or a lawyer even breaches your confidentiality and there is no safety risk, they will lose their license. So it's quite severe. So if you know of a doctor or a psychologist or any professional doing that, that is, of course, a cause for concern. If you're a danger to yourself or others, that's a different story, but there are protocols that are followed. There are also concerns that Western frameworks don't align with our cultural values. This one I think is, completely valid. There are Western frameworks that really just don't work for Arabs. They don't work for Muslims. However, there is a lot of work being done in making support available, making resources available that is culturally sensitive and that is suited for your needs specifically. And another, again, a really important point, finding the right support. There are a lot of male Muslim psychologists now. Finding that kind of support is really important if that's what you value in formal support. And lastly, with the formal support, there has been some generational differences. So we are seeing a trend of a shift in the way we speak about mental health. Billy Dibb's book, Boys Can Cry, that's a really big shift as well. And his, openness that he also sought formal support in some aspect. It's shifting the narrative away from it being very shameful to it becoming the norm. All right, last one, coping strategies. A main coping strategy is religious practices like praying or going to see a sheikh or a priest or going to the church. As faith offers both a spiritual and emotional framework that allows men to maintain their sense of culture and masculine integrity. So it gives them a safe space. Struggles are framed as spiritual tests as opposed to medical. This is a very thin line to go on because, yes, there might be a test, but it's still very important to seek support when you are struggling. They don't want to be judged as crazy, so they downplay their emotions, and they don't want to burden their family as well. They will, however, acknowledge it when it becomes physical. And mental illness or things like stress, things like anxiety, things like depression, they will show up physically eventually. In ulcers, in a heart attack, in the simplest one is grey hair or losing your hair. If you don't look after your mental health, it will show up in a physical way that could be quite debilitating. Okay, cool. Were there any questions? I got through that pretty quickly. There's a little bit more, but were there any questions about the cultural elements or the... No, go.
You said about religious point and the medical side. Can you repeat that? Like for me, for example, personally, I've always been taught and I believed it that if something's happening to me, if I'm going through something, that it's a test. And that I must be strong, I must say alhamdulillah, I must soldier on, I might have my bad day or two or a week, but I almost feel guilty
That you're...
if it goes on for too long. And I don't know, because I don't want Allah to examine me. So I somehow, like what you said, I mix the two together. Does anyone understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't know if that's a question for me to answer. Is that one for you to answer, Yahya? I mean, okay, from a psychological perspective, it's religious guilt, right? You feel that you being sad at a test that God gave you is, is impermissible. From my perspective, overwhelming, yeah. From my perspective, I look at psychology or our knowledge of psychology. We were able to discover or able to learn. There's a reason that it's here. There's a reason that these resources and these methods exist. And if they exist, then surely we're supposed to use them to help us get through these difficult times. I don't know, your hands want to add to that?
From a religious perspective, how Susan was saying that if it goes on for too long, they start feeling guilty.
Yeah.
But this isn't something that the Quran teaches us. It tells us to rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it doesn't, Allah doesn't discount your feelings. Look at Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, the father of Yusuf, when his son was missing for 30 years. What did the Quran say about Yaqub? He says he was so sad. He says, "Hatta biyaddat aynahu min al-huzn." His eyes went white from grief, and he cried for 30 years over Yusuf. And in the end, Yusuf sent back his shirt and he wiped it on his eyes, and he became what's the opposite of blind? Not blind. Right? So, but he cried so much from his grief that he went blind, literally. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say, Astaghfirullah Yaqub, إنه كيف تعمل هيك؟ لا بالعكس كان من الصالحين كان من المؤمنين كان من المخلصين. So it's very normal. Even the prophets went through that.
Doesn't Allah also mention that He likes when we come to Him?
Yeah, the more you knock the door.
He likes when we cry to Him. He likes to hear from us.
Yeah, that's right. He says فإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعان. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to communicate with Him. He wants you to call out to Him. He wants you to complain to Him. Obviously not in a negative way like لا شأنا. Like Ayyub alayhi salam. Ayyub cried out to his Lord. In a positive way. He says, Allah says, وَأَيُّوبَ إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And remember Ayyub, when he called out to his Lord, affliction has touched me and you are the most merciful. So even Ayyub cried out to his Lord in the end. And this isn't one statement, this is a lifetime that Ayyub went through. And he was afflicted and he was grieving and he was saddened by it. And Allah did not look at Ayyub alayhi salam for going through that and crying out to Allah, no, you're being weak, man. So Allah encourages this. That it goes hand in hand with the psychological perspective.
Would you say that mental health is more like universal, mental illness more like specific, and that placebo effect can
What do you mean?
can adjust how you feel? Like for example,
Like delusion, like being like,
delusion.
oh, today's a really good
Like,
day.
for example, you keep telling someone you're stupid, they're going to think like I'm stupid.
Yeah.
You keep telling someone, hey, you're happy now, they're happy now.
Yeah. So
How is it to say that plays a role?
I'll answer the first part. So mental health is your health. It's just whether you're happy or sad. It's just how you're feeling mentally. That's your mental health. Mental illness is obviously the diagnosis. So the equivalent is breaking your arm, having diabetes, getting cancer, right? They're all physical versions of it. Placebo effect can be quite powerful. It can, there's a lot of evidence to positive self-talk and shifting the way, so CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, is about shifting the way you think about things and how you react or your behavior slowly to have a more fulfilling life or a happier time. So there is a lot of evidence to that, but placebo effects can go very wrong. If you start to think I'm the best person in the world, you can end up becoming a narcissist, and then it becomes an issue. So it's all about finding that kind of balance and improving your kind of circumstances as you can.
Okay, then don't you see that as a worry when speaking to your friends? Some friends, they want to make you feel like you're right. You're not wrong, right? If you're going to go cry to someone, for example, no, you are right, he's in the wrong, or she's in the wrong. So that's why when you say it's be very one-sided if you go to your friends.
Yeah, I mean, that's why formal supports are obviously not the gold standard, but they're the preference, right? Because a formal support is going to give you a unbiased opinion. They're not going to necessarily defend you, but they're not also necessarily going to fight you. So they're going to find that middle ground. But a kind of an issue with formal support sometimes is you are telling that person what you want them to hear.
You're convincing them that you are right.
So if I'm telling someone something, I could paint the story completely in a specific light, so I look like a good person, or so that the situation looks positive. So a professional, however, will have the skills to be able to pick up on that You can kind of over time pick up when people are essentially lying or leaving things out. It's, you know, through behavior, what they repeat, etc. So, I mean, there's no perfect answer really. Whether you go to your friend or you go to a professional, it's not a flawless system. But the reason people recommend talking to a friend is psychology, or, you know, the idea of therapy was built on something called catharsis, which is when you speak about something, you release it. So sometimes if you don't want to speak about something, they recommend writing a letter. So if you're feeling really emotional, put it in a letter, address it to the person that you want to speak to, and burn it, or, you know, rip it up or throw it away, because it's the act of getting it off your mind that's meant to help you release that kind of emotion. Did that answer your question?
Fair enough. No, I get it. It's just that what I study, right?
Yeah.
It's like I study so many things, and when we study humans, human trials, right, we give them something that's empty.
Yeah.
And they start feeling symptoms, but you don't have the drug, you don't have this, but because they are in the atmosphere, they believe, they feel they have it, but reality you don't have it.
In psych, they do controlled experiments as well.
Yeah,
so obviously, to try and weed out the placebo effect, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect science. You're gonna get things that kind of slip through the cracks. But the hope is that if you repeat something enough times, you'll get the right evidence from it.
Even from religion perspective, هلا الشيخ يمكن يوسع أكثر. We seek help from we seek help from someone, like seek advice from someone who is professional and able to give you the good advice. Otherwise, as you said, you can't seek any friend and go and tell them blah blah blah. And that's why in the religion they tell us to choose our friends.
Yeah.
Not any friend, you know. So we need to see someone we trust. So if you tell them something, they keep the secret. Exactly. And they tell us the right advice.
There's also a risk that if they say that you're wrong, then you'll be more isolated. Then you end up losing that friend.
That's why you talk to multiple friends.
Yeah.
There's always a risk.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So men speak about this a lot when they're together, and they have this thing, you know, don't be weak in front of women, especially their wives or their fiance or the girl they're getting to know. They have this idea. How do they overcome this specific thought that they have, that if they tell their partner what they're going through, and they tell her, I feel sad, or I feel like I can't get up in the morning, or I'm overwhelmed by life, or, you know, the responsibility of a family is weighing on me.
Yeah.
They keep that to themselves, even though many men feel this way.
Yeah.
They keep that to themselves because then he thinks that his wife or his partner might start finding him unattractive, and she doesn't want to be with him anymore, because in their mind, they believe that women are attracted to power and powerful men. And as soon as that, but they actually say this, they have these conversations with each other, right? And they think that as soon as they lose that little bit of power, that she'll stop being attracted to them, and then, to be honest with you, she'll cheat on them.
Or she'll leave them.
Find someone else.
Yeah.
And like, it's very animalistic. It's like the animal kingdom. You know, when he loses his value now, he can't provide for the pride or the herd or whatever you call it, that he's useless now. So he acts tough all the time. That's why he doesn't speak out. So how can men overcome that?
Good question. Thank you. I think it's, I look at it from different angles. Firstly, if you expect your partner to be open and honest with you, the expectation is in the reverse as well. So if you want your wife, whoever you're speaking to tell you when they're suffering or when they're going through something, then it should be a two-way street where you also tell them. Because otherwise there's a disconnection, right? If I'm always confiding in you, if I'm always confiding in my partner when I'm sad or when I'm angry or when I'm upset and when I'm happy, and I only see them happy, maybe I'll start to think there's a problem with me. Or maybe I'll start to think that he doesn't trust me, or that there's an issue, or, it creates a bit of a rift between you and your partner if you don't have that like kind of open sharing. A lot of nods in the ladies. If you don't kind of have that like open sharing between you and your partner. So from a relationship perspective, you need that common ground and that trust. It's like you and a friend. If your friend is always, if I'm always telling you my problems and I never hear about your problems, I'm going to think you're laughing about me, you're talking about me, you know, there's something going on. Yeah, you'll just stop talking and then everything becomes very surface level. In terms of women liking power and status and stuff like that.
Believe that.
I understand.
But they actually believe that. I'm sure.
I don't need to speak
I
here.
didn't say that's true. I said they believe that.
I actually prefer, I think men should open up to their partners because it makes, so if you're going through something and the partner doesn't understand, vice versa, how would you be able to be compassionate to them? How are you able to help them? Like, you know, if you're having a bad day and you choose not to tell your wife what's happening, but you're so cranky and she's like the rules or whatever, and it's because she doesn't understand. But had you, for example, of explain the situation, then you work on that, well, okay, maybe he's got a point, or I understand he's had a bad day, or maybe he's had a fight with someone after, like, I don't know, do you know what I mean? But if a woman doesn't understand what has actually happened, and you come home and you're just so
Angry.
fired up, or the kids come home from work and they're so moody, and you're like, do you want to eat?
Noah.
I've had a bad day at work, 1, 2, 3. You wouldn't ask them to eat.
Yeah. Go.
Strengthening a man, I believe strengthening a man is when he talks about what he's feeling. Men think that's a weakness, that's strength when you speak up. Men need a hug.
Hey, don't start crying now.
That is strength. And ladies want that because ladies, they speak up. But the men don't because they think that's a sign of their weakness. But it's the opposite.
Okay, so let's just say you're in the teens, right? And there's two guys. One that always cries, always complains, one that never complains.
No, but
Are you telling me you actually choose
no, but
the guy is very sensitive and always?
No, but that's different.
Well, it depends. Why is he crying?
He's
a sword.
No,
Shh.
like the way of viewing strength is different. Like maybe for a woman, it's more about how a man carries himself, his responsibilities, how a man carries himself, respect. Like it's more about the actions he takes, not how much he makes or he's holding himself up. But it's okay to have the bad days, the good days, the angry days, all of that. But overall, he's fit for his responsibilities and he's doing his best every single day. That's all a good woman would ever ask for. That's how it's measured. It's not measured on, monetary success or all the other stuff. No, it's not measured by that.
And when you tell your wife or your partner how you're feeling or you've had a bad day at work, then she can cater to your needs and knows what to do.
Yeah.
But when you don't communicate that to her, that's where, like you said, it's going to cause a rift in the relationship.
Wait, hold on.
Do you know how hard for the men coming from overseas in Arab?
Yes, we know.
We know.
Do you know how hard it is?
Alright, wait.
Okay, listen. We grow up as not to be like a biscuit, the crack. We went through a lot of things and then we learn how to keep it inside and then we act. Think about it, come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, pray, do what you have to do and then you act. You don't like to talk. And you girls, ladies, you like to talk and you like to like every specific things. We can't do it.
But we just spoke. Wait. Hold on. Wait, yeah.
Yeah.
Mom?
We can't. That's how we grew up. So for me, for example, if I have something, I can't talk about it. Even to myself, I can't explain it. I have the feeling, but I tell everyone, leave me alone. It could take 1 week, 2 weeks, sometimes more, depends. I go home myself, I stay by myself till I can, process the things. Sometimes I don't know how to say it or what's wrong with me. I have this feeling, but I don't know how to say it. Just leave me alone. Leave me alone, and I will go. Yeah, so that's normal for us.
Mum, did you want to say something?
I think it's a very fair point. You will meet girls who are not emotionally intelligent, who have not been
Don't
to a
laugh at my
session
mum.
like this where they had this discussion. So I'll say to the women, start today with your daughters and show them that there is a lot of value in a partner sharing with you their emotion. And I'll say to the guys, start by thinking about, has this person been exposed to a discussion like this? How do they view men? And women grow. Girls will grow up and they will understand and they will become wiser. So test the waters. You can say something to someone and see how they receive that before you open yourself and make yourself very vulnerable to your partner or to someone you just met. And then see what you receive. And it doesn't mean they are a bad person. They just don't have the same exposure that you're having here today. And talking about mental health in this open forum really helps a lot of girls understand it. And if you're, start today. Start talking to them, invite them to something like this, talk to them about it before if you don't feel comfortable enough to make yourself vulnerable.
Thanks, Mom. All right.
Anyone else?
Anyone else?
Girls, boys. Yeah. Miss Green.
I just want to say something from like a personal perspective. I think it's very important for like partners to have a proper communication. Like I feel like communication is key in every single relationship. Even if it's just like, hey, I don't want to talk about it, but I'm not in a good mood. Just give them the time. Honestly, just give them the time. Sometimes men, it's very hard for them to open up and speak about their day and how hard their day has been. If they can just say, hey, I've had a bad day, I don't want to talk about it, that's fine. Let them be. They don't like nagging. I'm being straight honest. Men do not like nagging. I stand with men on that one. I do, just from a personal perspective. And something else I want to add as well, and I've also learned that from like personal experience. If you're ever feeling down, or ever feeling like you're going through a hard time, just go for a walk. Put your earphones on, go for a walk. What happens is when we go through like a mental state or we go through a mental, like, I don't know, issues or anything, it pulls our serotonin levels down. So when we go on like a walk or anything, it pulls our serotonin levels to like a survival mode at least, where we can just survive the day. So just go for a walk, guys.
Awesome. All right, we do have a Sam. Do you have a question, Sam? No, we do. Sam. Abuse. Oh. All right. Anyways. All right. So a key component of that is in any relationship, you need to be able to communicate. Whether it's in your friendship, whether it's with your parents or your kids, you need to be able to have an open dialogue where both parties feel comfortable sharing. It's honestly so important to maintaining a good and healthy relationship. You're going to have bad days, you're going to have terrible days, and you're going to have great days. But if you're not communicating, you won't connect.
And honestly, communicate to listen, not just to hear. Yeah. That is so important. To listen and understand.
All right, cool. Any sign? So we're just going to go over some signs someone may need help. We're almost done, I promise. What are some signs someone might need help? What have you noticed in your friends? Withdrawn, isolation. What? Acting out. Coming home at midnight. Changing behavior. All right, cool. So sudden concern or concerning changes in behavior, mood swings or erratic moods, seeming really sad or down, withdrawn from others, a lack of interest in things they usually really love or enjoy, negative talk about themselves, their future, their life, frequent or expressive anger and frustration or other really intense negative emotions, preoccupation of lots of talking about death and dying, deliberately harming themselves, mention of suicide. Just pausing on the mention of suicide one, talking about suicide has become very normal in the current generation. It's like, I'm going to kill myself, go kill yourself, etc. So I think with this one, it's just always important to double check. So if someone says it a lot, check in with them. Are they being genuine, or is it more of a joke? Is it more just part of their slang? Seeming lost, unsure, hopeless about their situation, lack of interest again in work, family, or hobbies, sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, increased use of alcohol and substances, confusion, disorientation, and disassociating, and then of course outward expressions that they're not coping and they're actually asking you for help. Resources. So again, the first thing is always family and friends, especially when other resources aren't available. At the bottom, where is it? Okay. The mental health services and support list. This is the New South Wales one, and then there's also New South Wales Primary Health Network. So the mental health services and support list, if you just type that into Google, you'll find it. It has everything. So if you need something specific for dealing with a parent that's got a substance use issue, dealing with children, dealing with culturally and linguistically diverse, you'll find things in Arabic. It's just a comprehensive list of what's available. The Primary Health Network, which I discovered very recently, is actually really good as well for all health. You go into it and then you find your suburb. So Southwest Sydney, for example, there will be specific resources available to your area. So if they've identified that there is an issue in your area, they might put funding, and anyone who lives in that area is able to access it. So in Nepean Blue Mountains, they had cheaper options to go see a psychiatrist for those who lived in that area, because they identified that that was a need. This isn't just mental health, it's all health. So if there's anything that you kind of need to check out, the Primary Health Network is a really good place to kind of start, especially with your area. You've got your professional support. So you have 10 sessions under Medicare. It's a rebate of $130 per session for a clinical psych and $100 for a normal psychologist. You need to go to a doctor to obtain a mental health care plan through your GP. You'll do 6 sessions theoretically with your psychologist, go back to your doctor. They do a quick check-in, make sure that you like them, make sure that's going well. And then you'll go back for the final 4. That's over a calendar year. So from January to December. Some workplaces have something called EAP, which is Employee Assistance Program. So I know in government they have them. It is different for every workplace. How many sessions you get, what you can talk about, what kind of support you'll get will differ, but it is usually free, and most workplaces will have it available. Same with, with private health insurance. If it's included, it might be included in your cover. It's always good to use Medicare first and then branch out after that. There are other options other than psychologists. There's counselors and psychotherapy and other specialists, but my domain is more psych. Other resources. This is not exhaustive, but these are just options. Lifeline has call, text, and chat 24/7. This is for crisis support. So if you're feeling really down one day and you just want to chat to someone, this is what these services are best for. You've got Beyond Blue, again, call or chat. Men's Line, which is specifically for males. Call or chat. There's Reach Out, which is for kids, and Kids Helpline. Kids Helpline also has resources for parents. And then you've got Black Dog, which has resources and information, so fact sheets, how to address certain things. It's more research-based, but they've got a lot of information. And that's it. Yes, ma'am. Yahya said I wasn't allowed to put his number on the list. He said, no, thank you. All right. Any questions? Anything? What? Oh, you guys are welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, stay sitting, please.
Oh, you didn't have to.
Here we go.
So cute, perfect.
Thank you. You were amazing. That was so good, Khadija. Thank you.